Welcome to the Ultimate Game Master's Guide for Ultimate Game Masters. Part 1. The Role of a Game Master.
When we talk about Game Masters, which is a general term for a person running a TTRPG of any kind, it involves a very complex role within the gaming community as it requires the knowledge and skills from many different fields. Why is this the case? Because GMs are there to operate every facet of the game world that isn't the player characters themselves. That being said, a GM is also the arbiter of all the rules that are enforced behind his table. Not only that, but they also get to decide who is going to get a seat at their table. There's a lot of talk of inclusivity in the hobby, but at the end of the day, the GM is the one spending much of their free time prepping for the session they are going to run and thus have the final say in this matter. Now, you may ask yourself, is the GM a player? Yes and no. They are a player in the sense that they are also playing the game, just from a different perspective. That being said, they are also the judge who enforces everything that happens within their game, so they are more akin to an observer who is also an event planner at the same time, if we use real-life analogies. With all that in mind, be aware of your role and the responsibility that it entails. Don't flaunt your power, but don't shy away from enforcing it either. You are there to maintain balance and make sure that the game keeps running smoothly. If there are hostile factors behind the table, it is your job to handle them, but handle them responsibly. This responsibility also has a tendency to inflate the GM's ego once they get a taste of all that quote-unquote power. But if it does, just remember, you are just a person sitting behind the table at the end of the day. Any perceived power you may have is in your head, or is only collectively agreed upon by the group in order to keep the game running smoothly. Here's where I will write down a few key guidelines that a GM should adhere to in order to run a successful game with little to no issues. Number 1. Be respectful of your players and demand the same in return. There are many disruptions that can happen in the course of a gaming session. From minor things like players fiddling on their smart devices and not paying attention, to arguing with the GM on their different rulings, to outright rage quitting and leaving the table. Know that you will experience some of these, and it is your job to tackle such issues with care. Make sure you tell your players exactly how you plan to run the game and discuss any potential issues they might have before the game starts. This is usually done at session 0, which will be explained later. And leave any issues that arise during the session for the end of the session, and abide by your rulings in the meantime. This will alleviate 90% of the problems that arise behind your table. Number 2. You are not the enemy of the players. While it's your job to animate the game world, its inhabitants and monsters aren't there to kill the players as soon as possible. Your job instead is to make sure the game reacts to the players' decisions and that it reacts accordingly. While you are not the enemy, you still have to make sure the world reacts logically, and thus you shouldn't pull back any punches. For example, if the party wanders into the cave of a monster that they have almost zero chance of beating and have repeatedly ignored your clues that this encounter is way over their heads, then run the encounter normally. They have made their decision, make them live with it. If you don't, your world will seem like no matter where they go, you'll always be there holding their hands, which will turn it into a video game tutorial, not a tabletop RPG, which is all about player agency. Number 3. Respect your players' time and have them respect yours. All of you are taking the time to gather around the table to play a game, which in your part takes a lot of preparation. At the same time, the players also have to take time off from their busy schedules and real-life problems to sit there in the first place. That being said, everyone in your group should adhere to being punctual to the session so that you can make the most of it. Time does fly when you're having fun. Another thing you should keep in mind is that not everyone will be able to make it to every session. For that, it's sometimes smarter to have a couple of players on the bench, so to speak, so you can call upon them to a session when it starts. As a rule of thumb, determine the minimum and maximum amount of players behind your table and start a session when either can be reached. Number 4. You can also have fun in the game. Just because you take on the role of arbiter and animator of the world the players inhabit doesn't mean you can't have fun. It's just a different type of fun. When you actually start GMing, you'll get a taste of how fun it can be to weave an elaborate plot between a group of NPCs and have the party fall right into their trap. Maniacal cackles are absolutely appropriate in this case. At the same time, you'll also experience the disappointment when the party figures out the plot way too quickly and breaks your seemingly elaborate intrigue in half, laughing while they do it. Instead of getting angry about it, embrace that quote-unquote failure. After all, TTRPGs are all about player agency, aren't they? Number 5. Roll with it. If your players go off the rails beyond the scope of the adventure, just go with it. Things like that can be very scary for a beginner GM, I know, but doing the opposite will result in railroading, which will kill the very player agency that you want to maintain in your game. Instead, if you want to steer your players back on track, try to find a way to do it without forcing them into it. For example, instead of having them step on a teleporter that takes them back to the quest-related location, you can pick an NPC that they've taken a liking to and make a connection between that NPC and the quest you wanted them to complete. Motivation is the key skill of a good GM. With all that in mind, you now know what kind of a role the Game Master fulfills within each gaming group. If you feel that this is something you can handle, then I invite you to check out the next part of this guide, which will be uploaded as soon as possible. If you like this video, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Remember to click the notification bell so you are notified when the next video drops. Happy GMing!